This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhu-Ewart. It's Wednesday, September 18th. This is Africa 54. A United Nations envoy visits Zimbabwe to assess the South African nation's human rights situation. How polarized politics in the United States is highlighting fault lines on race and identity. And a conversation with Kenya's award-winning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics teacher, Peter Tabichi. United Nations Special Envoy Clément Wool is in Southern Africa Wednesday on a 10-day visit to Zimbabwe. He's there to assess the country's human rights situation, specifically the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Wool's visit takes place at a time when rights groups are worried by a spate of activist abductions. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
Doctors and nurses at a vigil praying for safe return of Peter Gabriel Magombe, head of the Zimbabwe Hospital Doctors Association, who was abducted over the weekend. They also held a protest vowing not to end their strike until Magombe is freed. These incidents come as UN Special Rapporteur Clément Wool begins a 10-day visit to assess Zimbabwe's human rights situation.
I'm here at the invitation of the government of Zimbabwe to conduct a country visit regarding my mandate, which is to assess the implementation and the protection of the right to freedom of association, peaceful assembly in the country.
In the case of Magombe, doctors say he was abducted for leading a strike to press the government for higher pay. Health Minister Obadiah Moyo has denied the government's involvement in his disappearance. But rights group Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights says it is convinced the government is behind a spate of abductions of activists.
We've now had 51 abductions just this year. It's a massive concern, and all of these abductions are following similar modus operandi, where people come, typically men masked, using military-grade weapons such as AK-47s, breaking into people's homes, abducting them, torturing them. It's a huge concern.
Such concerns presumably will be raised with the UN rapporteur during his visit. Wool will present a preliminary report next week on Friday. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
An entire Liberian community is in mourning Wednesday following the deaths of at least 27 children who perished during a horrific fire at an Islamic school in a Monrovia suburb. Police spokesman Moses Carter says the children were learning the Quran when their fire broke out, and only 2 survivors were taken to the hospital. Carter says the blaze was caused by an electrical issue and that investigations are ongoing. President George Weah's spokesman Solo Kelbe says emergency services informed the president of the tragedy overnight and that he visited the school's location in Pennsylvania. President Weah tweeted out his condolences, saying, quote, "My prayers go out to the families of the children that died last night in Pennsylvania City as a result of the deadly fire that engulfed their school building. This is a tough time for the families of the victims and all of Liberia." Throughout the day, grief-stricken relatives gathered outside the yellow and green entrance to the building which housed the school. The Democratic Republic of Congo Army says it has killed Silvestre Mudachumura, the commander of a Rwandan Hutu militia, who was wanted by the International Criminal Court. Mudachumura had been a leader of the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, since its founding in 2000 by Hutu officials who fled Rwanda at the end of the 1994 genocide. The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Mudachumura in 2012 for alleged attacks against civilians, murder, rape, and torture in eastern Congo, where militia members have operated since the 1994 genocide in neighboring Rwanda. Now, violence in Cameroon's Anglophone region is forcing hundreds of schools to close, leaving thousands of children without access to an education. Serena Chaudhry reports.
Priscilla Ngumche is getting ready to go to school for the first time in 2 years. The 19-year-old is from Kumba, the second largest English-speaking city in Cameroon, where separatists have been fighting for a breakaway state. She and her brothers had to flee their home because of the violence. They now live in a small room in Douala, the country's economic capital, supported from afar by their parents.
So I decided to come here to come and complete my education because schools there are not really functioning that way. So I decided to come here to complete my secondary education, which is going to help me and my family.
The ongoing violence has forced hundreds of schools to close in Cameroon's Anglophone region, leaving thousands of children without access to an education. Many families have moved to French-speaking towns so their children can go to school. But the influx of displaced children presents many challenges.
They are disturbing us that they come, they don't have documents to prove that they were in school. They come, they don't have their birth certificate, they don't have their report cards. And so it is really heavy on us. Some are even coming, as you can see, if you move into classes now, we are forced to take them in class without uniforms, without any information like that, just to make sure we educate Cameroonians.
At Priscilla's new school, the number of children coming from the troubled Anglophone region has more than tripled this school year.
Reuters' Serena Chaudhry with that report. Now, business analysts say developing economies could face disruption from the shock waves of Britain crashing out of the European Union without a deal. Europe, and especially Britain, will be hardest hit by a no-deal Brexit, but the effect on global trading routes and supply chains could have far-reaching consequences. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
Brexit will affect not only Britain's relations with the European Union, but also with hundreds of other countries with which Britain currently trades on EU terms. London has negotiated new post-Brexit trade arrangements with several countries, including Central American nations, Switzerland and South Korea, among others. But that leaves hundreds of states, from smaller economies to relative giants like Japan and Canada, with whom trade would revert to World Trade Organization terms after a no-deal Brexit. And striking new trade deals won't be easy.
Many countries with whom we try and do trade deals will say to us, yep, that would be great. We'd quite like to know what your relationship with the European Union is going to be before we sign anything with you, though. So all roads lead to Brussels.
Such uncertainty doesn't help countries that sell goods to Britain. Kenya exports cut flowers, fruit and vegetables, with total exports to Britain estimated at $400 million per year. Bangladesh exports almost $4 billion worth of goods to Britain, currently traded under the EU's preferential rules of origin, which allocate zero or low tariffs on goods from developing countries. A no-deal Brexit will likely mean disruption.
The problem is that that will erode the preferences that some of these countries receive. So, for example, the advantage that a country such as Bangladesh and Cambodia have on certain products because they have access with a lower tariff, that would be removed.
Speaking last month, the head of the Africa Development Bank warned that the combination of a no-deal Brexit and the US-China trade war were hitting African economies.
The industrial capacity has fallen significantly, and so the demand, even for products and raw materials for Africa, will only fall even further. So the effect of that will have a ripple effect on African economies as the demand for their products weakens from China.
Britain, meanwhile, is stepping up its search for new trade deals, with ministers visiting New Zealand, Australia and Japan this week. Many of these nations' companies have huge investments in Britain and fear the chaotic fallout of a no-deal Brexit. Overall, for smaller economies, the impact is likely to be less severe.
African countries seem to be quite more relaxed, or developing countries more relaxed, except some specific countries that trade a lot with the UK, about the prospect of a no deal. And this is because, well, the UK has lost over many years the sort of importance as a destination of exports for many of these countries.
A no-deal Brexit would hit the economies of many EU states like Ireland, Germany and the Netherlands. But analysts say it is in Britain where the impact will inevitably be felt hardest of all. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
57% of teens say they fear climate change, according to a new survey by the non-profit Kaiser Family Foundation and the Washington Post. The survey comes as Greta Thunberg, a climate change activist from Sweden, brought her well-publicized Fridays for Future climate campaign to Washington. Sahar Majid has the details in this report, narrated by Kathleen Struck.
Fridays for Future protests bring together young activists, known as strikers, demanding action on climate change.
The older generation, especially in America, is not acknowledging the issue as an issue that it is, and that itself is very detrimental to this movement because it's preventing children from gaining the momentum they need.
Coltart and others have been galvanized by 16-year-old Greta Thunberg from Sweden, who started a movement called Fridays for Future last year to raise awareness internationally about climate change. Sweden supports the movement.
We always try to raise awareness on sustainability and environment. It has been a main topic for Sweden since the 60s, and we are aiming to be the first fossil-free country in the world.
Fridays for Future activists demonstrate on Fridays, calling on governments to enact climate change policies.
I think that older generations have really not understood the urgency of the issue, in part because things like fossil fuel companies and our government did so much to cover it up and so much to distract from the crisis that was going on that until now we haven't really realized the severity of the situation.
According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, in 12 years, damage to the planet from climate change will be irreversible.
I will be 30 years old by then, and I want to live past 30, and I want to be able to have children. I want to be able to have a successful future, and without a livable planet, that's not possible.
I think a lot of power is in the hands of the older generation still, and I think by, let's say, breaking that power cell down and passing the strength down to the youth will be much more. I think that would be the best solution to move these things forward as they are.
As Fridays for Future demonstrations continue around the world, the movement and Greta Thunberg have been awarded Amnesty International's top honor. For Sahar Majid, Kathleen Struck, VOA News, Washington.
South Korea has followed through with a pledge to remove Japan from a preferred list of nations that enjoy fast-track trade status, the latest chapter in an escalating diplomatic dispute tied to Japan's 20th century occupation of the Korean peninsula. Tokyo's removal from a so-called white list of nations enjoying minimal trade restrictions means South Korean companies would have to wait as many as 15 days to win approval to export sensitive materials to Japan, compared to 5 days under the fast-track status. Once this action comes just weeks after Tokyo removed South Korea from its white list of trusted trade partners. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a celebrated Kenyan teacher calls on Silicon Valley firms to support STEM education in Africa. We'll be back.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. After hours of a grueling journey, a plane lands in Kilimanjaro with its precious cargo from South Africa. 9 black rhinos in their crates are unloaded under cover of rain and the darkness of the early hours of the morning. So far, their journey has taken them 4,000 kilometers from the Tabatolo Game Reserve in South Africa to Ikirongo Game Reserve in Tanzania, where wildlife conservationists hope to reintroduce them to the wild. The hope is that these large mammals can repopulate the parks where they are critically endangered. Currently, they are believed to number about 5,000. Next up, designers from around the world have been creating installations across London to make people reconsider attitudes to waste, consumerism, and climate change. It's part of London's Design Festival, where sustainability is one of its key themes. Many pieces at the festival are new ways of thinking about old problems, like the prevalence of plastic waste, the polluting of the oceans, and the relationship between man and machine. And finally, this may look like your average bushwalk, but these people in the Australian capital of Canberra are geocaching. They're using GPS coordinates to track down cleverly hidden caches. With more than 3 million caches in 190 countries, geocaching is a scavenger hunt taking in people all over the world. Across Canberra, there are 4,000 such treasure troves to be found. Inside each is a logbook, where the finder can sign their name. The aim is to tick off as many caches as you can before putting the cache carefully back for the next geocacher to find. And that's what's trending today.
The growing political divide in the United States along ethnic lines and President Donald Trump's racially charged rhetoric are renewing debate over what it means to be an American. As VOA's Brian Padden reports, the American dream's premise that all immigrants can assimilate into a diverse cultural melting pot is today complicated by questions of loyalty, legality, and racism.
President Trump's critics say his rhetoric about Muslims and Hispanics in America and his restrictive immigration policies are maligning entire ethnic groups as un-American to gain political advantage.
We know that people are using racism as a way to gain power and resources for that privileges some and burdens others.
The president's supporters argue it is valid to raise concerns about undocumented immigrants who do not learn English or to question the allegiance of some Muslim American communities after a number of Somali Americans from Minnesota joined the Somali-based Islamic insurgency Al-Shabaab.
People have qualms about illegal immigrants, which is understandable. And people also have some qualms that our assimilation institutions are not working as well as they did a century ago.
Trump's rhetoric, critics say, has stoked ethnic tensions in referring to undocumented Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists, denouncing African-American football players for kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality, and conflating loyalty to the country with support for his policies when he called 2 Muslim American congresswomen disloyal for supporting a boycott movement against U.S. ally Israel over its occupation of Palestinian territories.
You don't have to support a president to be patriotic, and you certainly don't have to support a president to be American. That's just not part of the deal.
Trump's defenders dismiss accusations of racism, saying he uses blunt language to strike back at critics and political opponents.
President Trump, I think, is an equal opportunity insulter. Anybody who raises his ire or criticizes him is liable to be insulted regardless of race, creed, color, ethnic origin.
America's ethnic and racial fault lines predate Trump's presidency, but have been brought into sharper relief during his time in the White House, a period in which America is becoming more diverse and identity politics more prevalent. Brian Patton, VOA News, Washington.
It's time for our technology segment, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho, with an interview looking at very important academic disciplines. Paul?
Thank you, Esther. Kenya's award-winning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics teacher Peter Tabichi is an inspiration to many. The 2019 Global Teacher Prize winner recently sat down with Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori to talk about the STEM and why STEM academic disciplines are vital to the development of Africa's youth and its education systems.
So the winner of the Global Teacher Prize 2019, this is an award that was really started to recognize teachers, to show that teachers can also be like superstars. To me, getting this award is a kind of an opportunity to inspire other people, to empower other people through what I was doing. I've been teaching in a school which is in a resource-constrained environment. Students go through a number of challenges. They come from very poor families, like more than 95%. They come to school when they are hungry, such that, like in the morning, the level of concentration is so low. The first thing I noticed when I joined the school is that their level of esteem was too low. So I had to come up with the ways of really raising their self-esteem. I did that one through school clubs and movements, because that's a way of really getting them together to learn about the values which are really based on the 21st century skills.
You seem to have been having a special focus on STEM education, the science and technology. Why do you think that is critical to an African child?
I believe that STEM can really help in unlocking like the African's potential, because they'll be able to learn some of the skills, needed, like to solve problems, critical thinking, to be innovative, communication skills, sort of that. They are able to learn that, and then once they have those skills, they'll be able to really come up with solutions to so many challenges that we are facing Africa as a continent.
You have very specifically challenged the Silicon Valley to help the kids in Africa, those in Kenya, to help them and to help the teachers, particularly STEM teachers. Why do you think Silicon Valley should take interest in kids in Kenya?
The power of using technology. And I've been so much like using their services, like from Google, YouTube, downloading videos, going to the cyber cafes to download videos. So meeting them, I think it's really a great privilege, a wonderful opportunity if I can really try to convince them they can do more. What they are doing is great, and even do more to really help Africa really move forward through technology.
Now, you come from a country that is also, at the moment, very highly respected for being, very progressive in the area of technology. I have in Nairobi, for example. Question is, to what extent do you feel that the government of Kenya is supporting STEM education and STEM teachers in Kenya?
The government of Kenya is doing a lot to really ensure that children get quality education. One of the things they have done is they are trying to get a new curriculum which is competence-based and really STEM-based.
Quickly talking about the laptop project, this had been around for a while, but in a school where you have only one computer, what has impeded the distribution of this electronic equipment to most of the schools like yours, which is resource constrained?
It has already started. The children, like the neighboring primary school where I'm teaching, they have those laptops.
There has been a lot of attention on you, and obviously STEM teachers. Would like to ask you if you've seen any response from private sector in Kenya, particularly to want to support you, support teachers who are teaching STEM.
I can say that quite a number of them are really doing great, and they want to support the school, and they also not just not only my school but also even do the same in the other schools.
That was Kenya's acclaimed STEM teacher Peter Tabichi speaking with Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori. A Parisian startup looks to ease traffic in one of the world's most crowded cities. Entrepreneurs have created a green screen machine outside of Hollywood films to address the problem. VOA's Arash Arabasadi has our story.
This ship-like contraption in Paris looks like an escape pod straight out of a spy movie as it floats above the city's historic river.
When the boat is flying, you have between 30 and 40% less drag. It's a future.
Called The Bubble, it is the creation of Parisian startup ZIMBABWE. Co-founder Alain Thibault says they designed the craft to be eco-friendly.
You have batteries in the bubble, 2 electric engines, wings in the water, and with the speed, the wings lift the boat, you reduce the drag.
Bubbles, the flying, sailing water taxi, costs about 200,000 euros and travels as fast as 18 knots.
In France, the focus is on the taxi version. 1 pilot, 4 passengers. And we need to use waterways, because with our bubble, no waves, no noise, no pollution.
The company plans to launch in Paris, but local police recently clipped their wings.
Welcome to France.
Thibault says local regulations may sink the project.
We are waiting for the authorization to have a commercial line between east and west to cross Paris every morning. We will wait 6 months, but have a look. There is absolutely nobody on the river.
If blocked in France, the company could test friendlier waters in the US or Switzerland. Paris is among the world's busiest urban transportation networks, choked with motor vehicles and trains. The City Council of Paris aims to drastically reduce carbon emissions by 2030. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Paul, and good night from all of us here in Washington.